Hello and welcome to the podcast version of the Week in Review newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free at newsletter.theweekinreview.com. This is issue number 14, Men Can't Handle a BPD Baddie, a review of Obsession. Thank you to Willow for letting me steal your title. Indy Navarrete is a star, though I've had a million different and often conflicting thoughts about the critical and commercial darling that is Curry Barker's Obsession. What has never once wavered is that it features one of the great horror performances. I expect that Navarrete will not stop at beloved Scream Queen, but will go fully mainstream in the way that Anya Taylor-Joy did in the years after The Vavitch. And I know that this has colored every other part of my perception because I loved this movie the first time I saw it. 5 stars on Letterboxd and all that. But that feeling had already cooled somewhat by the second watch 3 days later. I still loved it, sure, 4.5 stars, but the bolding was gone. That's a text joke. You would know if you read the newsletter. But it hasn't come back. It's been a great year for horror, but nothing hit the zeitgeist like Obsession, which opened number 3 at the box office behind the Michael Jackson biopic, which is its own kind of horror movie, and The Devil Wears Prada 2, and then reached number 2 in its second weekend behind Baby Yoda. In a world where Amy Madigan won an Oscar for her bonkers performance in Weapons, I think there's a very real chance that the Academy awards another in her class. And with the year not even half over, I say with the utmost confidence, it would be well deserved. But the Weapons comparison goes deeper. Writer-director Curry Barker, no relation to the horror legend, though his actual dad has one of the strangest websites I've seen this decade, sits at an interesting intersection of two modern horror cohorts. Like Danny and Michael Philippou and Chris Stuckman, he built his career on YouTube. Like Zach Kreger and Jordan Peele, he built that career with sketch comedy. The That's a Bad Idea channel turns 10 this year, which, congrats. Though I will admit, I'm not its biggest fan. Checking out bits from across the years, there were certainly some chuckles to be had, but Almost Friday TV, they are not. When King Batch showed up in their parody of Talk to Me, I thought, oh yeah, these do feel like Vine/IG bits circa 2016, which is a fun little bit of nostalgia, but isn't a compliment. Mixed in with the skits are a handful of short films and a debut feature proudly proclaiming to be from the mind of Curry Barker, phrasing so obnoxious that even Blumhouse's marketing department wouldn't put it on Obsession's press materials. And T being so H right now, I didn't like any of them. There is some very effectively spooky imagery here and there. Pose in Warning, of course we know Dead Man Franklin in The Chair, but eventually each is crushed under the weight of its premise and promise. Obsession avoids that fate in large part by being extremely simple. This is classic monkey's paw. Sad boy Baron, interesting first name, aka Bear, Michael Johnson, is in love with Navarrete's Nikki Freeman, interesting last name, and uses a $6.99 nice toy called a One-Wish Willow to make her love him more than anyone in the fucking world. And then she does, but in a bad way. It's not clear how quickly things devolve. I've had conversations with multiple friends who all disagree on the timeline, and it's unfortunate that matters, but it does. Barker has said that his interest is in making grounded horror movies, trying to think through how people would really act and react in spooky situations. That's all well and good, except for the fact that that's a lot of horror movies, and also none of the ones he's ever made. In Obsession's very first scene, Bear is bearing his soul, Ari Nikki, to a woman who works at the local diner at the instruction of his friend Ian, played by That's a Bad Idea co-creator Cooper Thompson. She thinks it's adorable, he thinks it's weird as fuck, and they're both right. But the important part comes when Bear says that he wants to make his move during the trivia night that the three of them do with other friend Sarah, Megan Lawless. And Ian says, absolutely the fuck not, because trivia is the only thing that he cares about, and he will not let this man fuck up his vibes. Bear makes a move anyway, driving Nikki home after and then breaking the One-Wish Willow in frustration after failing to profess his feelings even when directly asked. Arguably the bleakest part of all of this is that Nikki liked him at least a little bit for real. You can see it in Navarrete's performance, especially like how she stammers like, good, when Bear says that no, he only likes her as a friend, but also Barker confirmed it in interviews. So yeah, this could have been so easily avoided. Sad. But here's the thing. The trivia never comes up again. And that fact alone destabilizes the entire film because it couldn't have happened off screen and gone unremarked upon because something dramatic happens every single time they leave the house and also most of the times they don't. So either this whole thing takes place over the course of like 5 days, which is what I'm going with, but creates its own problems, or it takes place over several weeks And no one actually cares that much about trivia, which means one of the only pieces of real information we have about a main character is wrong. Plus, Nikki gave notice at the shop they all work at before we even see her, and that's never brought up again. I don't know, man. There's either internal logic to what's happening or this is all metaphorical, and I think Barker wanted the former despite everyone giving him credit for the latter. The imagery is metaphorical, can be. No one actually thinks the clock in Bear's room the first night he brings Nikki home actually reads 1655. Like, what does it mean that someone on TikTok pointed out to my girlfriend who pointed out to me that 1655 is the year that the court of Northampton County, Virginia ruled against the freedom of John Kasor? Anything? Probably, but is it because that was one of the first times in the colonies that a civil suit forced an African into enslavement? Or was it because that was actually the first time that such a ruling was made at the behest of a free African, Anthony Johnson? The first one means something pretty straightforward. Nikki is no free man. The court of One Wish Willow has deemed her property of a baron. But there is an additional horror to what Johnson did. He was himself an indentured servant who brought Kasor over under those same terms. But while he was able to get out and become the first African landholder in the colonies, he refused Kasor any such opportunities. That is a unique sort of cruelty, and one that I don't think applies here at all. Enjoy your fun fact. Let's talk about BPD. I don't have borderline personality disorder, but my mixed personality disorder canonically includes borderline features. And what Nikki is depicting maps onto many of the associated behaviors really fucking hard. Like, people with borderline don't always feel things, but when they do, they feel harder than most of us can imagine. And when you feel that strongly, weird behavior feels not so weird at all. Like, it is objectively creepy when Bear wakes up to an empty bed, and in the wide shot of his POV, we see Nikki in the corner, like standing like a statue, right? Watching you sleep. You're so cute when you sleep. The imagery is much creepier, though, than the actual act. I wouldn't do that, but I have heard that watching the person you love sleep is relatively common, and the sweatshirt that Jake Gyllenhaal supposedly kept of Taylor Swift's because it smells like her isn't the weird part of All Too Well. When Nikki sobs that she doesn't think Bear loves her as much as she loves him, it straddles the line between spooky and silly, but also a genuine emotion. No matter what, BPD's number one symptom is fear of abandonment, and all the extreme impulsivity and violent mood swings and horror that we see spiderwebs out from a frankly justified fear that Bear will realize what he got himself into and try to get the fuck out. He cannot handle her extremes. He wants desperately to go back to the cute little montage we get of them in those couple of days where things were going well. He begs her not to keep doing weird shit, but he doesn't understand that her weird shit is her attempt at the same. Yeah, it's fucking crazy that she literally duct taped the door shut, but I don't think it's that hard to see where the impulse came from. She wanted them to have another nice day together, and this was all she could think of to keep him from going to work. And I know that she wasn't literally written to have BPD, but it's a useful framework through which to understand her because, quite frankly, the movie doesn't give us one. Her behaviors are really just whatever would be the most unsettling thing in the moment. Like those dead eyes that she makes while he is on top of her make no fucking sense. You're telling me that he has to literally like grab her face and point it at the movie because she won't stop looking at him, but in that most intimate of acts, she's not even present? Bullshit. She would be going for way too much eye contact. And while way too much eye contact could be creepy too, the image we get is definitely worse. The script is happy to tell us that Bear is taking advantage of Nikki, but this is the only time we see it as the violence it is. And it's awful. But is it an actual condemnation of Bear? I'm less convinced. Like, it's painfully obvious that this movie was written by a man. Put aside the choice to put Bear at its center, Sarah is done so fucking dirty, dude. And not just in the obvious way. Like, the idea that she wouldn't have called after Bear's grandmother died is one of those absurdities that you can just only chalk up to bad writing. But as a man with less than excellent communication skills who has been weird with enough women to fill 2 feature-length one-man shows, I'm willing to give some grace. Bear didn't know that the One Wish Willow would work. It wasn't even a premeditated use. He was just mad that he sucks and broke a $7 toy. There are plenty of people who make like voodoo dolls and love potions and shit in order to make people love them. Heck, Megan Lawless, done dirty Sarah herself, cast a text me back spell on a boy she hadn't heard from in a week. And on that scale, what Bear did barely registers. And so, of course, he fought the reality that was now facing him, checking fake Reddit to ask if the One Wish Willow is real, asking fake ChatGPT if being on Molly could make someone act all bizarre. But I think Bear thinks that he is a complicated guy in a complicated situation doing something that approximates his best. Like the teaser that was the entirety of my knowledge about this movie before walking into the theater was a snippet of a conversation that he has with a bored-sounding customer service rep played by Barker himself. The teaser ends with a Bear asking, "Is her love real?" And the rep responding, "Just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real." And I think someone should write a doctoral thesis about that. But the line that interests me comes shortly afterwards. Bear says he wants to cancel the wish and is told that the only way to free Nikki from whatever living hell she's in is to die. Barker's weird ear for dialogue is really prominent here. Every one of his scripts has a line or few that just feel wrong, and Obsession's worst offender is "not as long as you live." It's just such awkward phrasing and barely coherent as a response to "so there's nothing I can do." Like, "unless you die" was right fucking there. Utterly baffling. Otherwise, sounds like you have a moral responsibility to be there for her. If I were back in school, I would write my thesis about that, because I agree. He does. But what does that actually mean? Because none of the rules about how you're supposed to coexist with someone apply. How are you supposed to navigate someone's eccentricities and issues when they are literally your fault? Maybe you can't and have to accept them. Maybe Bear needs to overcompensate so Nikki can function in public. He probably should have refused to switch seats at the party he brings her to after she threatens to kill herself. And anyway, it's weird that that guy wants to sit next to Nikki in the first place. Maybe even preemptively, Bear should have done what Nikki did with Sarah when faced with a dare to kiss the person to his left. I don't know, but while he keeps saying that a real relationship needs space, they don't have a real relationship, and Bear is on the hook for committing to the fakeness of it. Until it becomes too much, and then his moral responsibility is to die. The end of Obsession is not the one that Barker wrote or that he wanted to film. Under pressure, he allowed a single alternate take, and Navarrete was so good that he just had to give in. Her version of events makes it sound more intentional, which is weird. But he wanted it to end the same way he ended his first feature, with everybody dead, except it would be romantic, like Romeo and Juliet. And I get the fuck you that he was going for, while also agreeing with his dad that the ending that we got is the bleaker one. But either case was a missed opportunity for the audience to be truly brought into their world. When Nikki's branch snapped off screen for a matching wish and we get to see Michael Johnston become what Navarrete has been, the film should have changed with him. Again, we have no real framework for what's happening in her head. We know that the One Wish Willow traps people. We hear Nikki's screams on the other side of the customer service line, and it's fine that we never switch to her POV. But here, we could have gotten the best of both worlds, seen what Nikki had been seeing through Bear's eyes for the brief few minutes before they glaze over for good. Be that like The Sunken Place or Harley Quinn's butterfly fantasy, or who knows, Barker is good at creepy imagery. He could have come up with something that tied it all together. Alas and alack. Still, Obsession looks excellent. Shot in a 3:2 aspect ratio with a mostly static camera, every frame could easily be put on a pretty fucked up Instagram timeline. Yet it's the movement within those frames that sticks with you. The first time that Nikki does the homage to Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse, I nearly jumped out of my skin. The use of shadow and silhouette is similarly hair-raising. So it's not shocking that silhouetted women moving weird are staples of his shorts as well. It is his thing. It's fine for directors to have things. I refuse to fact-check my film history professor saying that Francois Truffaut put freeze frames into his movies mostly because he wanted to be called an auteur, a term that he helped popularize as a critic for Cahiers du Cinéma. If it's not true, it's still true, you know? But I'm worried what those things mean for his future projects, because I walked out of Obsession a Barker believer, and I sit before this and you, but not God, because there isn't one, saying that belief is gone. The more I have obsessed over this movie, the more credit for its impact I've given to the performers in general, but mostly to Indy Navarrete. Like, she is the beating and bleeding heart of this thing. It can be funny or scary or emotionally devastating, and which of those things it is nearly always comes down to her. Even when she's not off screen, what you imagine she's doing and how she would be reacting to the events colors them. It is a towering achievement. And I hope that Curry Barker proves me wrong and that I can leave the theater for a future a believer again. I want a good Texas Chainsaw so bad. But regardless of his future, Obsession has given cinema at least one true breakout, and that alone is worth celebrating. 8.2 out of 10. Thank you so much for listening, watching. This has been the podcast version of the Week in Review newsletter. You can subscribe, newsletter.theweekreview.com. You get all of these when I write them instead of eventually, and also you get more things. I wrote a little bit about Top Gun Maverick, Mother Mary briefly. I've written about Project Hail Mary, just a series of like little short pieces that I don't feel like recording ever. That's where you get everything. Did I mention it's free? But yeah, I hope to write for you next time.